Can everyone hear us? Yes? Okay. No? Okay.
Good morning, everyone. Before we get into this,
Sorry.
If at any time you have questions, don't hesitate to raise your hand and ask them. Okay, great.
All right, so we were gone from March 2nd through the 7th. And so March 2nd, we had a really early airport drop-off, and we flew out of the new KCI airport, which was fantastic, I think. Huge, beautiful, bright. And of course, we had to get coffee and take a selfie. And we flew Delta, so that's why the Delta plane is there. We had a 5+ hour layover in JFK, so we walked many, many, many steps. Multiple cups of coffee and departure delays. We landed in the airport at Santiago at about 1 a.m. on Friday morning. We had to figure out a shuttle. We had to go through immigration, baggage claim, security. So we didn't really get to our hotel and our beds till about 2:30 in the morning. And so we were supposed to be picked up by 7 or 7:15 initially, and our coordinator was gracious and allowed us to sleep in till about 8:30. So we joined the rest of the FORO group a little later. There was about, 10 of us total that came. So it was Deaconess and myself, and then there were 8 other members of other congregations and ministry groups that came as part of the FORO attendance group that year, or that time. So on March 3rd, day began with cultural immersion, and what that basically means is you learn a bit about the culture, the flora, fauna, animals, people, traffic, a lot of things about the Dominican Republic, and they had picked a couple places. Since we were waiting for our other FORO members to join, we walked a little bit in the botanical gardens in Santiago, which was really peaceful and beautiful. And then they took us to the Tiano Valley Tropical Park. Tiano is one of the original peoples of the Dominican Republic, and so it was a park with a lot of different trees and flower varieties, but also cultural things that pertain to the Tiano people, like their gods and such. So it was kind of original peoples that were there, type of nod there.
Okay. So just to give you a context of what a FORO is a meeting of American partners with the ministry happening in the Dominican Republic. So the idea is that twice a year, people or organizations, churches, districts, whomever is supporting the DR literally travels to and stays in either Santiago or Santo Domingo and gets to see literally on the ground what's happening. So the general layout of this weekend is a cultural day, all the meetings, and then you go home. So this Friday, and if we would go to FOROs in the future, it would follow the same model. And the idea being that a cultural day gives us the opportunity to be in the country, to learn some of its history, to learn some of its culture, to eat at local restaurants, to just be where we are, to just get an idea of the context that they are serving in and we are visiting, to understand who their neighbors are. Just like in Kansas City, our neighbors are a little bit different than you might find in Des Moines or in St. Louis or Madison. So the idea being that the cultural day, it's got a little flavor of being like a tourist, except in Santiago, there's not a beach, there's not fancy hotels. It's meeting the people and the culture where they are. So the two gardens we went to are places that Dominicans frequently go. So this one, where you see the Jesus in the middle, this is like a central park where people go to walk in the mornings before it gets too hot. So this is a place that a lot of our missionaries actually do exercise most mornings, and that's just kind of part of their routine. And then the pictures that we'll see from the Tiano Park was, again, it's interesting. The guy was from Scotland or Ireland, and his wife is Dominican. And so they just started this garden because they loved the history of the people here, the Tiano people. They also loved gardens and plants and flowers and guinea pigs, actually, and goats and all that sort of good stuff. So that's the point of the cultural day, is just to get to see where we are and who it is that our missionaries are serving and who it is that we're visiting.
So the picture on the right is all of us on the bus to go to the Tiano Valley Park, and then that's the entrance sign on the left.
There's also missionaries in that bus with us.
Yes, the visitors and the missionaries that are serving there as well. They actually had a coffee roasting house, which both of us love coffee, so that's the bigger one on all of them. But they actually roasted it over an open fire, and it was Dominican grown and roasted coffee. That gourd, I had her take a picture because it was bigger than my head, and I was like, imagine if you're walking under this tree and that falls and hits you. But just taking a picture of the gourd wouldn't have done it justice, so it literally was bigger. Some of them they can eat the insides of, and most of them they just use for either musical instruments or like we had little bird houses they make, or bowls, colorful bowls serving bowls that they can make out of the gourds. And the top one I kind of took for my husband because it's an ambulance, just so you guys can see he works on an ambulance, but just so you can see the difference between our ambulances here and what they would use for that in the DR. And this is self-explanatory, just a few of the tropical beautiful flowers and trees, and then also they had a whole bunch of the mourning doves in an aviary that we walked through. The picture on the left is the Tiano sun god. They had gods for multiple different things, and they had them kind of placed throughout the garden, just to give some cultural history behind it. And then this is our guide on the right, Paul, and we all did get to sample cocoa pods as well, like raw chocolate. I'm not for certain that the worship of those gods is still continuing. Most of the people in the Dominican will refer to themselves as Catholic. Catholic and Dominican Republic citizen are kind of on an equal plane there. I did not ask that question, so I'm sorry. I don't know.
So the Dominican is a bit different than Haiti, even though they're on the same island. Haiti, you hear a lot about voodoo or Roman Catholic kind of being mixed with local religions that, like Tiano, these gods could probably be a part of. In the Dominican Republic, it's a lot of, as Annie said, Roman Catholic or just your basic Christian. But when we hear those words, they are understood differently than what they're used there. So, for example, Roman Catholic, we think of our Catholic brothers and sisters, Mass, beautiful churches. In the Dominican Republic, to be Catholic is actually pretty expensive. They charge for you to baptize your kids, and so it's more of a like a label, like a status, like, oh yeah, our family's Catholic, but it's not as though they are actively participating in a Catholic church. The flip side of that, and they actually do kind of mean this to be different, is Christian. And again, we understand Christian to be all those who believe in Jesus, who have that same foundation. In the Dominican Republic, and we would also call Roman Catholics Christian, right? We hold to the same Jesus. In the Dominican, they're a bit put against one another. So you're either Catholic or you're Christian. And if you're Christian, that can mean anything from Seventh-day Adventist to even more, I was going to say, Church of Latter-day Saints. They consider themselves Christian. They've got big cathedrals and schools. And so those are the two categories, but again, the words don't mean the same as when we hear them. Because I, of course, was very interested in the theology of what our missionaries are encountering as they're meeting their neighbors, and so it's a lot of either name only or lapsed beliefs. And so when our missionaries talk about, well, are your kids baptized? Are you baptized? They want to know what that costs, because that's the bottom line. And so when it's like, well, we don't charge for that, that's not really a thing. It's a conversation starter that you otherwise wouldn't think about or consider, because we don't charge for baptism. So just those kind of differences in what words mean. So did we encounter people that intentionally worship these types of gods? I would not say we did. No. But did we encounter people who were probably what we would consider nuns, the N-O-N-E-S? Absolutely. People who claim something, maybe Christmas and Easter, but again, in that environment, it costs money. And it's not a very wealthy, even what we would consider poor here would be considered doing pretty good there. So that's just not a cost that they can justify, or that's important enough to make that happen.
So this was the restaurant that our coordinator took us to, where we had different types of Dominican Republic specific food and fresh squeezed juices, and I had to take a swing.
You can also see in the background, that's actually the ocean way back there. So it was really, really interesting because we're kind of in the mountains in Santiago, but at this particular place, because we had kind of gone up, you could see the ocean way in the backyard or background.
Right, that's as close as we got.
Yeah.
All right, so the FORO reporting, this is where we went to hear all of the reports from the area missions, plants and churches, and what their goals and needs are and what work is being done. Initially, when we went to the seminary, we did have opening prayers with the seminarians, and some of the missionary team was also with us. I was very thankful that Pastor Ted Cray sat behind me and translated everything into English, because they did do a message as well as praise and prayer, and I was thankful to have him translate in behind me as I was listening in Spanish. It was amazing to hear the same songs and prayers and liturgy, but with different tunes and in a different language. Pretty awesome.
Okay. So just again to give you context, the seminary is a 3-story building. The bottom story is a Lutheran school, and we're going to get to more of that, but it's a 1st through 3rd grade school that functions outside of this building. The second level is a church, an actual congregation in that neighborhood. And that's the space that the seminary uses for chapel, but it's also used on Sundays. They have a pastor. That pastor is very involved in the school. And then on the 3rd level is the seminary itself. So because we were there on a Saturday, we did not get to tour the school, but the middle is open. So it's like, so you can look over the railing and you can see the middle of the school. So just imagine on a weekday, we've got littles learning in the middle. We could have chapel happening in the middle, and then we've got bigs learning on the top. So thanks be to God. The top is also where potentially teams could stay. They have dorms up there. It's where all of our missionary professors have their offices. It's where some of our missionary projects, like translation of theological materials, happens. So there's a lot going on in this space. On the same property, I don't know, I'm not good at distances, but just a stone throw away is something called the Good Shepherd Lutheran Home. And that is where we have 6 individuals with special needs who live with caretakers. And that's like a whole extra special thing that maybe we'll get to if we have time, but super, super duper cool stuff. And then up the hill, they call it Golgotha, but it's a house where the single seminarians live. So they've got to hike like this mini mountain to get home, and then they hike back. Literally, it's straight up. I did it last time I was down there, and then back down. So just think about that being in the middle of a neighborhood, in the middle of a community, just the power of presence and the power of really and truly knowing your neighbors. So that is just a really cool kind of locational thing to think about. And then secondly, as Annie said, we did the liturgy. We did Lutheran liturgy. It was just in Spanish. And so thanks be to God for those missionaries who could translate the message. But even if they hadn't, we knew what was happening, because it's the same liturgy we have. They just got a hymnal that's like this big because it's written for the Spanish language. So it's all of our same hymns, but with tunes that work with the way that their words work, if that makes sense. So even if we hadn't had translation, we knew what was happening. We knew invocation, we knew prayers, we knew psalms, because it's the same. Thanks be to God, we have the same foundation. So you could call what's happening in the DR St. Matthew of the South, because it's the exact same thing. It's LCMS through and through, word and sacrament. So that's kind of the context of chapel. And then we went upstairs and heard all the reports.
That took pretty much all day. We did break briefly for lunch, and then after the completion of the reports, then we went to the seminary chapel again for evening vespers with the seminarians and also a message. And then we were taken to the home of Pastor Cray and his family for a time of fellowship with all the missionaries that were serving there for a barbecue. And that was awesome. And then when we left, their little children had, earlier I had talked about the gourds, what they did with the gourds. They had made small little birdhouses out of gourds and painted them. And then when we were all leaving their home that evening, they were running up to each one of us and giving us one of those to take home with us. And that was special.
One more time. Okay. So just to give you some context about what these reports are, what does this mean? So at a FORO, again, twice a year, fall and spring, all the missionaries, all the alliance missionaries, which just means that they are national pastors who the LCMS partners with to work on our projects, and then seminarians all explain what they've been doing for the last year. And it was so very exciting, because what I took away, one of the biggest things I took away, is they don't let the grass grow under their feet. So some of these missions, some of these little churches are maybe only 10 or 15 years old, and they already have their own baby missions. So they're already going out into their neighborhoods, into communities around them, and figuring out what those needs are, and figuring out how we could meet those needs and could point to Jesus. So we heard reports from the seminary president, from fourth-year seminarians, from some of the missionaries that we interacted with, some of the Alliance missionaries. Sometimes they were in Spanish, and we had these cool little headphone things, and someone was translating for us. I felt like I was at like a spy conference, okay? And then sometimes they were English and vice versa. So then the Spanish speakers got to hear Spanish translation while we heard it in English. And if you know me at all, you know I like knowing all the things. So I asked all the questions, and we wrote down all the notes. So if there's something in particular that you're really interested in, like more about Alliance missionaries, more about their projects, and we're going to talk more about the churches and then the baby churches that they're starting. But chances are between the two of us, we took all the notes about all the reports because this is really exciting stuff. And as Pastor Fritchie, when he was here, said, a big goal of these FOROs is how can we learn from each other? So we get to go down and we get to hear from them what work they're doing and how they're meeting the needs of their neighbors. And that allowed Annie and I to really have some cool conversations about, well, what could this look like for St. Matthew? What could this look like in Lee Summit? What could this look like for partnership abroad? What does this look like for Christians loving their neighbor? So when we say reports, we heard, literally all day, we sat in a conference room and heard and listened and asked questions and heard and listened some more. So they are really excited to share what it is that they're doing with us. And in every report, there was blessings, there were prayer requests, there were struggles, they told us everything. Because they're not doing it perfectly, but they want us to know that this is work that they're doing. And I think it would be the same if we were talking about something we were working on. Goals and objectives, gifts, prayer requests, struggles, all of that. So that's kind of what we got to see and experience.
So the top left is the seminary building itself with the sign in the front and the cross. So as she said, the bottom level is the school, middle level, chapel, top level, conference room, seminary, and offices. On the right and the bottom, these two pictures are of the Good Shepherd Lutheran Home for the 6 residents with special needs.
Okay, so really quickly to tell you why it's such a big deal that there's a house for teenagers with special needs. So in the United States, we could argue we have a couple different life issues, right? We, as a culture, don't really appreciate babies in the womb. Right? We've got a lot of pushing for abortion. We could also argue in the Western culture as a whole, we do not value end of life. So we think about euthanasia, we think about assisted suicide. So those would be issues that we would say, yeah, those are our life situations that we as Christians have to stand up for. In the Dominican, family is everything. So they are going to take care of their older ones. They are going to love and cherish their babies. But their life issue is if their baby is born different. So if there are physical handicaps, if there are mental handicaps, if there is different brain pathways, right? We think about autism spectrum disorder. We think about ADHD. If your kid starts presenting those, that's a shame, is what their understanding is. So either you hide that child and no one ever sees them. I literally saw a house where Pastor Cray said, there's a 20-something boy with special needs that lives in the back of that house, but they hide him when people come over. It's a shameful thing. Some families will go so far as to abandon their kids. And the state-run institutions for people with special needs are horrible. And just trust me that word hardly encapsulates what it is that happens. So we have had missionaries and also local Dominican Lutheran Christians who can talk the state language. You know, they have all their certifications, but also have their faith background, that go into these settings and say, we can do it different, and we're going to show you. So they've done different, and this house is one of those ways they've done different. So they took 6 children who were abandoned, who had severe special needs, and said, with individualized care plans, with love, these kids can thrive, and they do. They have. There's one who's probably going to graduate out to live on her own because she had her needs met. And they all know that Jesus loves them. And they get to be involved in the school. They're part of that church community. They are loved. And this is the way that in the Dominican, Lutheran Christians are standing up for life. And I guess you could say they're playing the long game, right? So the government's not going to change on a whim. But when you can say, look, there is evidence in that. There is oomph in that. And so it's a really, really great thing to hear that they know the needs of their neighbors and they're working intentionally within the system to do that which is needed for the body of Christ. So.
Just an explanation of more photos. The top left is the chapel area, the church congregational area in the seminary. The bottom left is Reverend Fritchie, and actually the picture behind him shows how many pastors are currently serving in different countries that were trained at that seminary. And then the picture to the right is the conference room, and then the far right is just a view of the top level where the offices, the kitchen, and the dormitory rooms are. And then as you can see, there's an open space all the way down to the bottom, like she said. So this is on the top level.
So all the seminarians attended the FORO as well. So we had lots of young men who are learning to be pastors sit with us, learn with us, meet us. It was kind of like a work day for them. They got to hear the presentations, hear our questions, interact with us. You'll also notice that around the fence thing on the inside, there are country flags. That's because the seminary takes men from countries all over Latin, Central, and South America. So they all have their flag represented. And it was a question I asked, is there any sort of inter-country issues, right? Well, you're from Mexico, so I don't like you because this, whatever. They answered it honestly. Sin is sin, but at the seminary, all of these men are here for a reason, and they're united in learning Jesus and learning how to teach Jesus for their neighbors. So there's not a lot of issue with that because these are their friends, these are their confidants, these are their partners in the work until they go back out to their country. And for some of them, they're going to be very alone. We met men from Cuba, Venezuela, Haiti, right there in the Dominican, Mexico, Argentina, Chile, maybe, Peru. So these men are building the brotherhood, the connection, so that when they go back to their home countries and they're the only guy for miles and miles, they still have friends. They still have that foundational understanding of who they are in Christ, who they can go to for help, but then what the message is that they're sharing.
And it also just shows the power of Christ to break down barriers that separate between different countries and different peoples, that you are united in Christ, and so that's what matters, nothing else. Top left picture here is a piece of artwork that I thought was really pretty awesome. So I just took a picture of it. There's a view from the other angle looking towards where the conference room would be, of the other side of that railing. And then on the right side is a photo of a screen where they showed the gal that's in charge of the mission trip opportunities, educational trip opportunities. She had a slide up of what some of the current needs are, and so I just snapped a shot of that as well because she was showing that during her presentation. So, go back. I was going to say, you can see some of them are like the missionary education program, VBS, Mercy Outreach, youth retreats where you would actually be doing sport retreats for Dominican Republic youth, playground renovation, seminary facility maintenance. So there's lots of different opportunities there for participation. These were just some photos. The top right is 2 of the gourds that the kids made, the birdhouses that they made from the gourds. The center picture, I think 3 meals we had. The empanadas made from scratch, empanadas, which were just fantastic. And then on the left, that's actually our lunch that we had the day that we went to the FORO to hear all the reports. So it's cassava bread is on the top left. They had some fried eggplant, chicken and veggies, rice, and some cold potato salad, which was very different but really good. On March 5th, we actually went to worship at the Lamb of God Lutheran Church in Licey, which is a suburb of Santiago. And so that we had Bible study and service, so 9:30 Bible study, 10:30 worship service. And then we had a tour of, before the service started actually, we got a tour of the school. There's also a school classrooms attached to that church as well, which the public school students actually rent, like the government rents from us, correct? And so the public students come there for school, but then they have an arrangement, since they're renting from us, and we do chapel every day. They do chapel with them. They do Bible studies with them. So it's an opportunity to witness to all the kids that are coming in for public schools. And I just thought it was amazing that the public schools would rent from a Lutheran church, because here, you can't even say God in the public schools. So that was a pretty amazing arrangement there, and what an opportunity for witness to those kids and teachers too. And then after the service, we did also have a meeting where they showed us their budget. So they just very plainly and transparently said, here's our mission budget for the next year. This is where the needs are. This is how much. And they just kind of went through that with us. But the entire budget for their mission work in a year is $164,000, which we were like, that's it? The school that we were talking about at the seminary, the Lutheran school that they're really trying to get accreditation for so they can get more benefits from the government for that school. That is what I'm talking about here, the all-inclusive. The principal of that school, she is very, very well qualified to teach and to be a principal, but also knows a lot about kids with special needs, and so it's no kid. Every kid is accepted at that school, and then they are grades 1 through 3 right now. They need 15 students per class to get accredited, and it costs $15 a month to send your kid there, which I was blown away because I know what it costs here to send your kid to a Lutheran school. So about $15 a month for a kid. So there's, obviously there's like scholarship opportunities there, and teachers, they're needing teachers, and also to increase their class size so they can get accredited. So following the budget meeting then, Deaconess Sarah, her mentor, Deaconess Cheryl, and her husband, Jonathan, who is a pastor, we went to their home, and then we wanted to bring a few things back with us, so we had them take us to a local grocery store, and then we ordered Domino's pizza and went to bed.
Okay, so just to give you a little bit more background and just understanding of what we're seeing and where we were. So as Annie said, Licey is a little suburb in or outside of Santiago. And something to sort of understand is in these cities, there's all these little pockets of communities. Maybe you would think of like in New York City, there's Little Italy and there's Chinatown and all those little neighborhoods. So in these big cities in the Dominican Republic, there's all these communities, and they usually all have their own names. We'll show you a picture of another place we stopped at. And what's different compared to the United States of America that we understand now is you don't really leave where you grew up. So you're born in that community, you go to school in that community, you get a job in that community, you get married in that community, you raise your kids in that community, and it just continues. It's not as though, like, you're not allowed to travel. It's just a matter of, like, why would you? If traveling is expensive, if all your needs can be met here, then that's where your life is. That's what you do. That's who you are. So when we think about Licey, that's a community. Yes, it's in Santiago or near what would be considered the big city of Santiago, but that's where these people are. That's where they send their kids to school. So for these missionaries and for their approach to their neighbors, they are going into communities and trying to set up spaces there for people to hear and know Jesus. So we'll talk about another little baby missionary plant, as I'm calling them. And when you hear about it, you think, well, it's 10 minutes away. What's the big deal? Just drive over. But it is a big deal because transportation is expensive. You might not have a car. You might just have a motorbike. You might just walk everywhere. And it's just far enough that that's outside of your comfort zone. And if our goal is to meet people's needs where they are and bring Jesus to them, well, then that's a barrier that let's not fight against. Let's plant where they are. So Licey is kind of one of those plants. As Annie said, a public school rents from us. Thanks be to God. This used to be, just from me being there last year, this space used to be a Lutheran preschool. But COVID kind of did that in, and it just wasn't sustainable. So when the public school came in and said, hey, can we have this building? Yes. And so the pastor of this congregation who presented to us, who did the Bible study, who did the divine service, he's like employed by this school. He does their chapel. He does Bible time. It's a big deal. They have this Bible test every year. It's a government state-run thing. And so it's fully accepted. And in fact, we went up on the roof. There's a picture of Annie on the roof we'll get to in a minute. But this building is all set to build a second story because they have more kids that could go to this school than they have space. So just think about that too. There's this opportunity to grow up, to have more kids coming, and we're getting paid to tell them about Jesus. I'm just so excited. So anyway, school and education is a really big opportunity in the Dominican because, again, if everyone's either Catholic or Christian, then who cares? We just need the space and we need good, safe grounds.
So the picture on the top left is the church side with part of the classrooms showing, but that's the church door with the double crosses. The bottom right is the interior of the sanctuary, and then I just took a closer up shot of the altar area just because I thought that cross was really awesome. I am on top of the church on the one in the left. They actually had a ramp that started at the bottom and it just kind of wrapped all the way around, so you could literally just walk all the way up to the second or to the top of the church. And I thought, what chance am I ever going to have to stand on top of a church? So there I went. The top center is the church sign. Of course, we did another selfie at the church door. And then the bottom picture I included, this really struck me because I actually was looking for something to bring back for Luce. And I thought, well, that'd be a sweet thing to take back to her. And as I was looking at it, Deaconess Cheryl says to me, do you know why she doesn't have a face? And I was like, actually, I hadn't really noticed that she didn't have a face, but now that you mention it, why? And she explained to me that in the Dominican Republic, you are Dominican. It doesn't matter. Facial features, hair color, size, ethnicity, skin tone, doesn't matter. You are Dominican. So they don't put faces on any of their dolls or like that because they all identify as one people, which I thought was really awesome. Yes, that is the Dominican flag colors that she has on. March 6th. So this day, this was a bonus for us, yes, a true bonus. The family we met was lovely, lovely, lovely. So Deaconess had been asked to stay one extra day to have a meeting with some of the deaconesses that were serving in the DR. So that was set to be at like 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So Deaconess Cheryl and her husband have a goddaughter, Isla, that lives about an hour away with her parents. They had to move back into that community to take care of, was it Giselle's mom? And then the business, yeah, and they have a takeout business. So they had to move away from Santiago. So Pastor and Cheryl go to visit them, whenever they can. And so they thought, wow, we'll just take this opportunity to take Deaconess and Annie out there to meet them and have lunch with them. So that morning we drove about an hour outside of Santiago to visit them, and Giselle, Carlos, and Isla were their names. And we stopped along the way. It's customary there to take a gift in gratefulness for their hospitality. So we stopped at a roadside stand and got some fresh fruit and some maize to take with us, corn. And then we went to their home for lunch. She had made this specific to the DR soup, san gancho. And it has, I listed out the ingredients, but it's a very special soup they make for very special people on very special occasions. And so it has like 2 or 3 types of meat, plantain, potatoes, corn, carrots. They serve it over rice with fresh avocado. And so she was finishing up making that when we got there, and then we all sat down outside and had a meal with them, and then went back to Cheryl and Jonathan's home for devotions, and then deaconesses meeting with the other deaconesses that were there. And I have some pictures on the next slide.
Just to give you a quick context for how it came that Cheryl and Jonathan are the godparents to this little Dominican girl. So when Cheryl and Jonathan first got to the DR, of course you have to learn Spanish, you have to get to know the culture. And so they were given a task to go like far away from the city, have dinner, like be successful in the language and the culture, and then get home. Got it. Okay, so they got a taxi, and that driver was Carlos. And they just, in their like broken Spanish, and he knew some English, but he was just really friendly and nice. And so they were chatting as they could. Cheryl and Jonathan ended up inviting Carlos to stay for dinner, mostly because they weren't sure how to get a taxi home. So they thought, we're just going to keep our guy. He's going to stay with us. But anyway, it just kind of started a friendship. And so Cheryl and Jonathan would use him whenever they had need, and just got to know, well, he has a girlfriend named Giselle, and getting married is expensive. Oh, now we're pregnant. But throughout all of this, Cheryl and Jonathan were friends, spoke about their faith, witnessed, invited them to church. and they got married, and they had Isla baptized, and they are members of our congregation. And even though they had to move away, they still try to get into the city, which again is kind of a big deal, once or twice a month to attend church. So it's just a small little picture of the power of presence, the power of witness, that which the Holy Spirit works. But now they have this really, really tight connection with a Dominican family. And so we met, Giselle's brother came over for lunch, and people are popping in and out, and Jonathan and Cheryl are not strangers in this, again, new community outside of Santiago. And so you just think about, we can do the same thing here, right? We talk to our neighbor when we're putting out the garbage. We invite them to church. We get to plant, and the Holy Spirit waters, and this is just one of those little pictures of thanks be to God that we got to see kind of how that came to fruition. And it was a pretty great day. And then just to give a little context, you know that I am the president of Concordia Deaconess Conference. So Cheryl had organized for some of the LCMS deaconess missionaries down there to come over and just have a chat. They can't always come to conference. They can't always participate in what we're doing. And so I got to share with them what we're working on in CDC, what I do at St. Matthew, and just to get to know them a little bit better and to be able to have fellowship and, as Annie said, devotion and prayer together. So that was pretty great. But just so you know, the FORO officially ended on Sunday. So all the meetings kind of ended with the budget. So everyone else who was a visitor traveled home on Monday. And so that's why this was kind of a bonus day for the little deaconess meeting, and while we were so blessed to get to spend time with this little family before we left.
And then 7 a.m. flight out next morning. This was, I believe, the name of their town, but I would not even try to pronounce it. But that we took it partly because of that, and also to show the gas prices because they're in pesos. And it's like 45,000 pesos for a gallon of gas. And then on the right is a picture of Deaconess and I with Carlos and Giselle and Isla in front of their home. Top left is Pastor John and Deaconess Cheryl's in the red there. And then Deaconess and I and having lunch with them. Bottom two pictures are the mace, the roasted mace stand and the fruits and vegetable stand that we stopped at to get a gift for them. And then the one on the right is the interior of their home. Top left, Deaconess by the beautiful bougainvillea outside Cheryl's house, Deaconess Cheryl's house, and then the picture of the deaconesses that were together there for the devotion and the meeting. Bottom left, my favorite snack ever is fresh cut coconut, and Pastor John bought one and cut it open for me that night so that I could have that before I left. So that was pretty special. And then the right behind picture is just a photo from the plane before we took off from Santiago. So amazing trip, some amazing opportunities that we had, very relationship focused, building relationships and spreading Christ through relationship. We have so many brothers and sisters in the faith that we have yet to meet. What an awesome gathering that will be when Christ returns. Some initial ways we feel we can come alongside as a congregation at St. Matthew's would be through mission trips and financial support. Financially supporting the formation of the Lutheran school, renovating the program or playground at the seminary, which is for the children of the surrounding community. So this would be a mission trip geared towards primarily youth, but interested adults as well. Mission education would be participation in the day-to-day life of missionaries, going with them, doing what they do, staying with them. It's kind of an immersion in missionary life for anyone who's interested in learning and experiencing that, and maybe going into the missionary service themselves, or deaconess programs, pastor programs. And then there was a need that the seminary brought forth for internet, because it's very costly over there. They don't have several things to choose from like we do here, so it really costs like about $17,000 a year to have internet service at the seminary, because they need to have really good internet service. They have a lot of remote programs that they do, remote teachers for their programs. So that was one thing that stood out as well.
So I guess just to final thoughts before we take any questions. As I had said before, some of these missions, some of these churches are only 10 or 15 years old, and they have these little baby plants that they're doing. And so, for example, the youth-based trip that we're talking about is one where a church that actually is in a former dance hall, so disco style, they repainted, is going into their neighboring community, the next community over, and has gotten some kind of youth and families that are interested in being together, interested in learning about Jesus, but they don't have a space. So one of the seminarians is kind of working on what that could look like and how youth could connect with youth. There's another youth one in Santo Domingo where that property has a really great volleyball court. And so that would be another opportunity where youth and, those of you with good joints, not me, could go and just play a game, have devotion, be together. Again, learning from one another and meeting brothers and sisters that don't look like us or sound like us, but are in the gospel, that are in Jesus with us. And then just thinking about the financial opportunities, their entire budget is $164,000. I just think that we have such an abundant blessing at St. Matthew to be able to partner to help with some part of that. And that, gives opportunity for further FOROs, for more of you to go down, for trips, for opportunities for us to be hands, but mostly to be ears, to listen and to hear, and then come back and tell other people or learn something and come back and love our neighbors a little bit differently. So those were all the things about all the things, because we only have an hour. But are there any questions that we can answer right now or that we can clarify?
Also, did everyone get a survey? If you did not get a survey, I do have more. So if you could raise your hand if you didn't get an interest survey for mission trips or higher things, chaperone, that type of thing. No, everyone has one? Super.
So, yeah, take 2 minutes and fill that out. You can leave them at the tables. But then also, if anyone's interested in supporting specifically or individually, we have project information too, if you feel so moved to do this on your own. But Annie and I are going to talk to the board of directors about what we as the whole church might be able to do as well. So, Phyllis, did you have a question? Okay, I will bring some over.
I was more efficient than I thought.
Okay, oh, yes. So the deaconesses that I met with are American. They're part of CDC. But the deaconesses that graduate from the seminary are from all over in Central and South America, and their uniform is red, which is super cool. And so the meeting I had was with those who affiliate with the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod in America, who then serve and work with local and Dominican deaconesses. Yes, except one is Haitian, the Dominican, one is Venezuelan, one is, I think, Chile, and then the one whose wife was super pregnant, he is from, I want to say Portugal. I think they had to learn Spanish as well as English because they spoke Portuguese at home. Yeah. So those are what we call alliance missionaries. So they're missionaries that partner with the LCMS but are more local than our guys. Although we do have a seminary professor from Argentina. Yeah. Yes, ma'am. Yeah, so I mean, Andy and I are going to meet more specifically, but something that I really think we could easily connect with is the gap in the school's budget for scholarships, for teacher training, and as Annie was saying, they just need one more person on their staff to be accredited by the government, and then that's like a whole extra level of like, we'll pay for some utilities, we'll pay for, and so that particular mission lost a partner this past year from America, just a church that couldn't continue it, just kind of how that goes. So I do think that that could be a natural sort of connection point for us. And yeah, so that would be part of it. Mm-hmm. Yes. Right. So, this entire budget, the DR budget, is all partner-based. It's all through support. So that's why they have these 2 FOROs, so for people to come down and either see what their money's been doing or see how they could tap into that. Now, I will tell you that, like, the missionaries we met, like Cheryl and Jonathan, or Ted Cray, or Joel Fritchie, who is here, their budget for them to live there is separate from the mission. So they have to do that individually. These are just like utilities for church buildings, program materials, formation, like pastor and deaconess, continuing ed formation materials, the school stuff. All of those are in this DR budget. Okay, well, on behalf of Annie and myself, thank you for your support. Thank you for allowing us to attend. Thank you for allowing us to show you some of what we learned and what we saw. If you have any questions moving forward, we're happy to answer those individually. We'll probably keep our pictures and presentation up for another week or so. But again, just thank you so very much. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, thank you, thank you. And I also wanted to add that Pastor Andrews had said that he would do a link to this on our Bible study page on the website. So if you know of anyone that wasn't able to be here that might want to take a look at it, that will be linked up through that page.